He went out very fast here last year. Female in the field, search of the course record, 2:22.29 course record from running 2012. Alongside her, the second-placed athlete from last year, Shashu Insermu has the best time. Went out very fast here last year. She went through halfway in under 70 search of the course record.
It'd be interesting to see what she's learned from that experience. I think you and I both felt that she was almost too gung-ho, wasn't she? Too aggressive, and then ended up paying for it. I think at one stage she was even ahead of the pacemakers from them.
2:23.28. I think last year she went through halfway in under 70 minutes.
It'd be interesting to see what she's learned from that experience. I think you and I both felt that she was almost too gung-ho, wasn't she? Too aggressive, and then ended up paying for it. I think at one stage she was even ahead of the pacemakers from them.
Fair due. Yeah, that's right. I think she for second place. Very difficult for the way they've set out this year. The female athletes are going out so fast. They all
through 3 kilometres.
Felt they had to go with
off these early
all paid the price.
And of course, it's all a question of settling down and just seeing how you feel.
Fair due.
Saw the athletes at breakfast this morning.
Second place,
took the team bus with them as well.
The way they've set out this year is probably more sensible.
Contemplation as they through 3 kilometres. So just clicking off these early clicks, and of course it's all a question of settling down and just seeing how you feel. They'll take a right turn. At breakfast this morning. We very short bus with them as well, going towards or in front of the museum plane. Contemplation as they notably think about the casket. We'll get a good view of that, I'm sure. It was nice to see the Hurst routine as they now come out of Foggle Park. They'll take a right turn. Photos taken in front of very shortly they'll be going towards or in front of the museum
is so special for not only the Rijksmuseum but the other museums in town.
It was nice to see them.
Seems very fitting that you have a press conference there, the best backdrop that the city can offer for international visitors, so special for not only the Rijksmuseum but Kenya and Ethiopian the other museums in town. There, so it just seems very fitting that the pacemaking group have a press conference there. The best backdrop seems to be that the city can offer for the pace and international visitors, his fellow pacemakers, fast Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes. Interestingly, there in the middle of the pacemaking group, Edwin Kipchum seems to be really directing the pace and directing his fellow pacemakers.
Not surprisingly, there's a marathon there showing there. There is the Rijksmuseum, if you like, Amsterdam in all its glory. And it doesn't get much better refurbishment. Going through the arches of this famous museum, which of course is more than just about the night watch, which actually is being restored at the moment. They'll go through a marathon there showing off, showcasing. You mentioned the European Championships in all its glory 3 years ago. Doesn't get much better than field events. Going through the arches of this famous museum, this very square, which of course is more than just about the night watch, which actually is being restored at the moment.
Sport, and I think it's a great way of
come out into the
bringing
athletics. You mentioned the European Championships held here, Richard.
Amsterdam has those some of those field events and places in the city which make that possible. Well, city athletics is some of the become a very popular sport. The athletes in that leading group of bringing athletics much closer to the public. And fast Amsterdam has those 2:04.53 and places in the city which make that possible. So the lesser known, some of names also in that group of athletes in that leading group. We talked about Bernard Koech, another, and you can see Abdi Nagaya, Kenyan, still in that group, right at the back, probably quite sensibly. And not wanting to some of the lesser known names any harder than he has to, group of as you say, Chris, so important for him to athletes to be with the group and take advantage of, still in that group, really letting them set the pace and him just be quite sensibly relaxing as much as he can, not wanting to the advice that he'd been given was just to there he is, but just as you say, Chris, so important for him to. My only worry, as I mentioned, is that this is going through at 62:30. We mentioned the second group, which is behind really letting them set the pace and him just halfway, so that's relaxing as much as he can. Pace, and I think the danger for advice that he'd been given was just to maybe ends up just between the two groups if he's not careful. My only worry, as I mentioned, is that this is going through at 62:30. We mentioned the second hanging onto the coattails group, which is behind them at 67 and yet halfway, so that's quite way ahead of quite a different pace. And the danger for Abdi is that he maybe ends up between the two groups if he's not careful, trying to hang onto the coattails. There he is, just taking a drink. Hanging on to the coattails of his first group run in Amsterdam.
And yet
he's 11th
way ahead of the second group. So approaching 5 kilometres.
Helps Abdi that he knows the course.
Sub-2-hour marathon pace. Kipchoge went through 5K in 14:13, which is where we are now on the clock. They're not far behind that, you know, are they? They're going along at approaching 5 kilometres here in these opening, just a few kilometres from last weekend. 5k split. Sub 2 hour marathon pace. Eliud Kipchoge went through 5k in 14:13, which is where we are now on the clock.
Probably a little bit faster than scheduled.
That, you know, are they? They're going along at a fair old lick here in these opening 14:30 on the nose. Let's give you that is lively. That will put them, that will put them inside on this pace.
I think you're right. They have set out probably a little bit faster than scheduled, going through 5k in 14:30.
Yeah, 14:30 on the nose.
Still in that leading group, just trying to hang on.
Will put them,
importantly, took his
side on this pace.
First bottle at the 5 kilometre drink station. Well, Nagea still.
So they're heading south.
Still in that leading group, just trying to hang on.
Stadion Weg.
Importantly,
which comes all the way back to the Olympic Stadium where they started. They won't do that. They'll
drink
take
station.
Another right and go down Beethovenstraat, and then another tight little loop. So they're heading south, twist shortly entering on this Stadion Weg. They'll go back north, which eventually comes all the way back to the Olympic Stadium where they started. They won't do that. They'll take another right and go down 14k and 20k, and then another tight little loop, which is picture perfect. It really is on this course, and then they'll go back north again and eventually settle down, and the long
number 11 on the right of the screen is
20k
another Kenyan athlete,
which is
Morris
picture
Gachaga.
Perfect. It really is.
Today is only his second marathon, but his debut performance in Paris earlier this year went well. 2:07. Number 11 on the right of the screen. He another Kenyan athlete of Morris Gachaga. Today is only his second marathon, but his debut performance in Paris earlier this year went well. 2:07.46, and he
5k split for the women.
Is confident of improving on that today.
Getting through there in about 16:28, 16:27, 16:28, approaching 5 kilometres. So let's try and bring you the 5k split for the women. If you can see them come through here.
I think the women have got a few more paces because they've got both male pacemakers and female pacemakers, and just other men who are not pacemaking but looking for a time of around that 2:20. So they won't be short of people to run with. The women have got a few more paces in the men's race. They've got both the question male pacemakers can take them. If female pacemakers and just other men expect the pacemakers to be pacemaking but still looking for a time of around that 2:20, 25k, and maybe as far as they won't be short of 30k to run with. I think in the men's race, the question is how far pacemakers can take them. If they can do a good job, we would expect the pacemakers to be still at the front of that group through 25k and maybe as far as 30k.
Yeah, when Kiptu, you mentioned, did a terrific job last year. He's got a half marathon best of 59:26. He's never actually won. Talked about an entire marathon, 25 years old. This is finished third here, so again, he will have the experience of knowing this course. 14 in total. And the word is that he's in good shape.
I think Chris is in good shape. I think last year, 2018, was a great year for him. I remember being in Mumbai at the start of 2018 when he won Mumbai in 2:09 in pretty difficult and different conditions to what he's got here in Amsterdam, and then he went on to Hamburg. Chris is in good shape. I think last year, 2018, was a very great year for him. Big city win, being in Mumbai in 2018, at the start of 2018 when he won Mumbai, went to 2:09 in pretty difficult and different conditions to what he's got here in Amsterdam, and then he went on to Hamburg and won there. So he had two. He said he's done all the training, big city wins, and he's ready. 2018, 2019 has been a race year for him. It'll be interesting to see. Went to Boston if he can. Didn't finish the race there, but we were talking here today. Coach Gaetano Tessema yesterday, and
he wasn't able to finish in Boston.
He's done all the training,
that's a DNF,
and he's ready
for 2019. In fact, he
race well.
Had any specific race preparation for
if he can
the Amsterdam Marathon today, and
win here today.
Sometimes that can be no bad thing. Yeah, he wasn't able to finish in Boston, was he? So that's a DNF for 2019. In the women's
in fact, he hasn't just spotted a British athlete on the left of the screen in the blue vest, the
Amsterdam Marathon
from Hastings AC, Ross Skelton.
We were hearing yesterday. Sometimes that can be no bad
thing. One of those
thing.
athletes, as I say, he's not there for pacemaking. He's there to run his own women's race. he'll be spotted a British athlete on the left of the screen in the blue vest, as we said. Hastings AC, Ross Skelton. Pacemakers for the women's race have been one of those athletes. As I say, he's not there for pacemaking. He's there to run. If they keep that pace, his own race would be inside the course record. He'll be aiming for a time of around 2:20 here in 2012. As we said, the 2:21 pacemakers for the women's race have been asked to go through halfway
we've been really
in 17:30.
With course records.
And if they keep that pace, they would be inside the course record.
In fact, in the men's race, the course record is gone in each of the last 3 years. Last year with Chirono, the year before that by Chirono again. Daniel Wanjiru won here in 2016, also in with course records.
Yeah, and I think the fastest 5 times.
In fact, in the men's race, the course record is gone
been run here
in each of the last 3 years. Last year with Chirono, the year before that just by Chirono again.
Has moved on.
Daniel Wanjiru
I remember being here to watch Hailey when he won here 14 years ago in 2005. Fastest 5 times that have been run here in Amsterdam. Now we're talking about 2:04, 2:05 in the last 2 years, and that just shows how the race has moved on. I remember being here to watch Hailey when he won here 14 years ago in 2005. He went 2:06. Whether that'll happen again today, that's another big ask. Now we're talking about 2:04, 2:05. We're hoping, and every year organisers have asked the athletes to aim for.
Well, they've been interested psychologically. Kipchoge last weekend was asked what do you think this stuck to our marathon success will do
again today, that's
to marathon running. And he's absolutely convinced that now people know that it's physically possible, humanly possible to run a marathon in under 2 hours, even though, of course, last weekend wasn't psychologically. Kipchoge last weekend was asked he thinks that will have an impact marathon success will do to marathon running, and he's absolutely convinced that now all over the world, now that people know that barrier has been broken, humanly possible to run a marathon in under 2 hours, that the shackles, of course, last weekend will allow people to have the confidence to say, okay, world record. He thinks that will have an impact, and that 2:01 big city marathons like Amsterdam, like Rotterdam, like marathons all over the world. Now that people know that barrier has been broken, he thinks that will only take off the shackles, if you like, and it will allow people to have the confidence. That's a head-to-head. I think many people would like to see now. We know it's possible now. And yes, that's 2:01:39. That's the official world record.
Kipchoge, they have raced each other, but I don't think they've ever raced each other when both of them have been at their best.
2 seconds outside.
Talking about Kenenisa, really, because
that's a matchup. That's a head-to-head. I think many people would like to see now.
Over the last 5 or 6 years has been rather up and down. And Kipchoge, they have raced each other, but I don't think they've ever raced each other when both of them have been at their best. 12 marathons, 11 victories. About Kenenisa, really, because even his Kenenisa's second-place finish in Berlin over the last 5 or 6 years has been rather up and down. Set a new world record, so which certainly can't be said of Kipchoge's record. Consistent marathons, 11 victories, consistent world class. Even his Kenenisa second place finish shown us how good he can be. Was behind, and yes, Kipchoge when he fascinating to put a new world together. So when they're both at their best.
So the runners here, these are the elite men, 7.5 kilometres, approaching what, half an hour of running here in Amsterdam this morning on a really nice, pleasant autumnal morning.
Both together when they're both at their best.
Yenu Alimiru, of course, who we know. So the runners here, these are the elite men, 7.5 kilometres, 28 years old now. Half an hour of running here in Amsterdam this morning on a really nice, pleasant world finalist in 5,000 metres. So we know all about him. We remember many tussles with Mo Farah, very much on the track, the other leading track athlete. He's just 28 years old now. A little bit away. How worried are you about that? Is that a gap between Abdi and world finalist in 5,000 metres? So we know all about him, and we remember many tussles with
Abdi
Mo
is still in contact with the group. I think
the other leading track athletes. He's just
Ethiopian,
a little bit away. And how worried are you about that? Is that a gap between Abdi?
When we talk about struggling, you only need to be a few % off your best. I'm not concerned. You're going to find this pace Abdi is still in contact with the group, even with a best time about the 2:08. Ethiopian, Alimiru's best time. He seems as though he is. I think he is struggling. We said earlier, when we talk about struggling, you only need to be really well a few % off your best. Close to, and you're going to find this pace difficult. Even with a best time of Chicago, 2:08, that wasn't able to. Alimiru's best time. Well, that's Abdi. I think, as we said earlier.
No, disappointing run
things
from Mo
go
Farah,
really
but
well for him
Abdi
today, you might
looking
get
and
close
sounding
to
really confident, wasn't he, and benefiting from having trained with
just a year ago in Chicago. Mo wasn't able to.
He's known as the nomad, isn't he, really, Abdi?
Yes, Valentine last Sunday, his manager was
disappointing run from Mo Farah, but Abdi
used to travel
looking and sounding really confident, wasn't he,
Kenya for training, sometimes being Holland, but now he seems as though he's found his best base.
He's known as the nomad, isn't he, really, Abdi?
Being with Valentine Kipchoge, his manager was saying how Abdi used to travel coaching of Patrick Ethiopia for training, Kenya for training, sometimes being Holland. Very interesting to see how she's as though he's found here today. His best base last year, really, being with her debut marathon today in Cambodia, her third marathon. She ran in London earlier this year, but her best time was from Amsterdam. Very interesting to see how she's the interesting question here today is whether she can get anywhere close to 2:20 her debut marathon, which would put her into that third marathon really top bracket of ran in London earlier this year.
Well, again,
but her best time was from Amsterdam 12 months ago. The interesting question for Masai is whether she can get anywhere close to 2:20, which would put her into that really top bracket of female marathon.
At the moment, again, another making their way back up, going north 10 years ago. A little loop. So we'll keep a close eye on Nina Masai. The men approaching Stadion Weg, and 10 kilometres. They've still got, what, a kilometre and a half to go. Churchilan, and at the moment they're making their way east, due east. Back up, going north. They eventually hit the Amstel. They hit the Amstel at about 12 kilometres. Through 8 and 9 kilometres, back along Stadion Weg, and then they're going to hit,
and that's quite a tough part of the course in many ways, not only because they might feel a little bit of headwind as they head south
before they eventually hit the Amstel.
We've heard that there's a little bit of wind. We'd probably just say it's a breeze really coming from the south. And that's quite a tough part of the course in many ways, the shores of the Amstel. They might feel a little bit of headwind at the turnaround as they head south, just short of halfway. We've heard that there's a little bit of wind. We'd probably just say it's a breeze really coming from the south, and so they might feel the second half they get onto the shores of the Amstel might be but slightly faster than the turnaround points at Ouderkerk, just short of halfway.
Behaves as predicted, they'd have a really welcome tailwind in the last 7 kilometres as they head due west. So any effect of a slight headwind between, say, 15 and 20 kilometres shouldn't be something to be worried about at all. If the wind, as they hit 9 kilometres as predicted, they'd have will bring you a really welcome tailwind in the last 7 kilometres as they head due west. So any effect of a slight headwind between, say, 15 and 20 kilometres shouldn't be something to be worried about at all as they hit 9 kilometres now. So we'll bring you got the split 10k split. Remember, they went through 5 kilometres, the leading then in 14:30, which is a really lively pace last year. And it looks as though they've been maintaining that quite nicely here. To that they are today. So got the
yes, I think he went through halfway to 11
last year. He went through,
so came home second half negative split under 62 minutes.
So interesting to see how close to that they are today.
Was able to take so much off the course record. He went through his own course record from 2:11 2017, and so came home.
Took over a minute.
Second half
that record, and
negative
nice relaxed
split
style.
under 62 minutes, and that's why he was able to take so much off the course record, his own course record from 2017.
Of course, the runners on the right-hand side took over a minute there off that record. And nice relaxed style. The elite men. Joys of big city marathon courses we share exactly the same course. Really nice, the best in the business. They're up in the sport, you might say.
One of the interesting debutants in the women's field is the Ethiopian Degitu Asmaru. She's running alongside Mimi Belata and Shashu Nseramu.
The best
she comes into the race with a very fast half marathon. One of the interesting debutants in the women's field is the Ethiopian Degitu Asmaru. She's running alongside Mimi Belata and Shashu Nseramu. 07. She comes into the race with by far the fastest very fast half marathon time in that elite women's field, but which today is her debut. So no experience half marathon, and that's 66. Probably going to come into 07. There you are. There's on the right-hand side by far the fastest half marathon time in that elite women's field. But I'm calling Mimi Belata, Ethiopian born, now running for Bahrain. Mimi Bellator, no experience alongside, and Degetu Alimiru, probably going to come into Shashu Inse. There you are, there's on the right-hand side.
Oh, the three of them going really nicely.
Three Ethiopian athletes. I'm calling Mimi Bellator Ethiopian-born, now running for
the
Bahrain.
men's race. They're approaching
Mimi
10 kilometres now.
Running alongside Degetu Alimiru and Shashu Insemu.
Oh, the three of them going
back to
really nicely.
Race.
I'll try and bring you a 10-kilometre split
for
the men's race. They're
as we expected, of about
now.
15 athletes. Kenyan, Ethiopian, and the Somalian-born Dutch athlete Abdi Nagaya. The men's race.
Unofficially 29:27 through large 10 kilometres, so they have slowed slightly.
Athletes.
In fact, quite appreciably from that first 5-kilometre split, so maybe that was a little bit too keen from Edwin Kiptu and his fellow pacemakers, so they've just reined it in a little bit. 29:27 through compares to 29:08, so they have slowed slightly. Girona on his way quite appreciably from that first 5-kilometre split, so maybe that was a little bit too keen
was
from
just hanging
Edwin
back.
Kiptu and his fellow pacemakers, so they've just reined it in a little bit. But 29:27 compares to 29:08 last year launched Girona on his way to that course record.
I think it probably explains why 10K Abdi Nagaya was just hanging back. He was probably aware, both in terms of the feeling, as well as Chirono looking at his watch that when he ran his course record 2:04.27 through 7 seconds slower, 10K, and we can see ahead of the leading pacemaker that Chirono set last year, running on the shoulder when he ran his course record 2:04.06. Frederick Kiptu and Noah 7 seconds and trying to orchestrate things we can see in a sensible way. The leading pacemaker, I'd almost call him a professional, just running on the shoulder. As you said, Chris hasn't run a marathon yet. Frederick Kiptu has just been happy to stay, trying to running half marathons, sometimes orchestrate things in a sensible way. But often Edwin Kiptu just running as a pacemaker, almost call him a professional in these big city marathons through to halfway. Chris hasn't run a marathon yet and has just been happy to stay 30K, running half marathons, sometimes competing, pacemaking at the half marathon.
Just a shot left of picture there, number 5.
Just running as a pacemaker
Elisha Rotic
in these big city marathons through to halfway, and
got a great record in winning marathons. He's won
25, sometimes even 30K.
That's important. It's always interesting to see pacemaking athletes, regardless of just a shot left of picture there, number 5. We haven't mentioned him so far today. Elisha Rotic from Kenya, a victory in a marathon, wherever that got a great record in winning marathons. He's won in 2:06.13 runner at best. So that's important. It's always interesting to see Kenya having athletes, regardless of time, whether they've got the competitive spirit.
I think you're right, Chris. Coming into the race,
a victory in a marathon, wherever
I know my coach always used to say to me, "You're only as good as your last race."
Runner at best.
If that last race has been a win, then the confidence that
such a terrific track record
you bring into the race. I think you're right, Chris. Coming into the race, Rotic won. I know my coach always used to say to me, "You're only as good as your last race." Of his last 6 marathons, if that last race has been a win, we ought to keep an eye on him. Confidence. Number 5, you bring into the race counts for a lot.
He's also got a devastating burst of speed in the latter stages. So just mark your card for that. We're talking about number 5, Elisha Rotic there. As we go back to the women's race, there is number 5 still in the mix there in that leading group, but just a little bit off the pace of those 3. He's also got we've been calling him the devastating burst of speed in the latter stages. Should we just mark your card for that? We're talking about number 5, Ethiopian-born Elisha Rotic there. Here we are with the women coming through. There is that 10 kilometres in the mix there in that leading group, but just a little bit off the pace of those 3. We've been calling them the 3 Ethiopians, which Richard said quite rightly said comes through. Mimi Bellator is now representing Bahrain, but she's Ethiopian-born. And here we are with the women coming through.
I said there were 5 athletes, 5 female athletes who've run under 2:24, but in this leading group, there's probably about 8 or 9 female athletes. So I think a few of these athletes are operating at a pace much faster than 5 athletes, 5 female athletes who've run under 2:24, but in this leading
they're on
group,
sub 2:20 pace.
There's probably about 8 or 9 female athletes. So I think
inside 32.50.
A few of these athletes are operating at a pace much faster than Wukinish Alamu run before. She's in the same training group as
at the moment they're on sub 2:20 pace, having gone through 10 kilometres in
and Haven
inside 32.50.
F5 F5 in the picture. Kuteni Shona, she's in the same as the best time group, 2:23.32, which is Asmeru ran in Houston, and right at the back of picture there, Haven, another of the race favourites, F2 Asmera Gebru, finished third here last year behind in the picture Kuteni Shona, and the best time of 2:23.32, which we've got all the Houston and the favourites in the women's race in the leading picture there, and another of the race favourites, F2 Asmera Gebru,
and still going really nicely through 11 kilometres. Pretty sure they're going to take another sharp right.
So we've
got that'll be the last kilometre
the favourites in the women's race in the leading group, and a few others too.
And still going really nicely through 11 kilometres. 14 kilometres. Pretty sure they're going to take another sharp encounter. Possibly a little bit of a headwind kilometre. We use that term hit the headwind's probably even too strong. Head breeze, perhaps, as the conditions are really nice. It's around 13, 14 kilometres that they'll start to encounter possibly a little bit of a headwind, but we use that term. Job of the pacemakers probably even too strong. Really important, perhaps. Often underestimated, Richard. I always feel it's a huge responsibility, isn't it, to provide the pace that's required, make sure that it's bang on the money, and that takes a lot of experience. Job of the pacemakers, of course, really
just important. Reading about what was happening last week in Vienna,
Richard, I always feel it's a huge responsibility, isn't it, to provide the pace that's required, make sure that it's bang on the money, and that takes a lot of experience.
You were telling me, Chris, that they were in Vienna a month before the race, just reading about what was happening last week in Vienna. They were going to be running, and so many of the pacemakers were so nervous. Bernard Lagat, very experienced pacemaker, just expressing his nerves. You were telling me, Chris, that they support his friend in Vienna a month before the race to get him on the very course.
Absolutely right. Going to be running, huge responsibility, a huge honour. The team spirit, I kid you not, was genuine. Just between all the pacemakers, they were so pleased for Elliot, to support his friend Kipchoge, and the choreography to get him to that was involved. Absolutely right. Of pacemakers coming in, a huge honour, sort of drop in, drop out. Team spirit, I kid you not, was two at the front, genuine, one captain, between all the pacemakers. They were so pleased for Elliot, so honoured, beautiful. It was almost like a choreography that had been perfected. It was involved perfected again. The teams of pacemakers knew exactly what he had to do, when he had to do it. System they had. With two at the front, two behind, marginal captain, then Elliot, then two women, all contributed to. It was beautiful. It was almost like a choreographed dance that had been perfected and perfected again. Each man knew exactly what he had to do, when he had to do it.
But I suppose no matter how good the pacemakers are,
gains, as they're called, which
as an athlete, you're out there on your own,
which was, of course, a little bit of sport.
You've got to put in all the hard training, and as we know in the marathon, really the race comes down to how. But I suppose no matter how good the pacemakers are and how much energy you've got over an athlete, that last you're out there on your own, and you've got to put in all the hard training, and as we know in the marathon, really the race comes down to how
often we see
how
the
fresh
real
you
racing
are
start
and how much energy you've got over
30,
that last 10, 12 kilometres.
And it's not surprising, he often described as what barely 12 kilometres into this race, we still have a really healthy crop race. Abdi Nagaya, the real race back there, just still keeping out of 30, sometimes a little bit later, 35 kilometres. It's not surprising, certainly, very much at this stage. This is a very deliberate 12 kilometres into this race, isn't it? To be part of the group, a really healthy crop, to stick at the back and not get too excited. Still at the back there, just still keeping out of trouble.
So 19 athletes in that leading group.
Richard, he's certainly very much part of that group. This is a very deliberate ploy of his, isn't it? To be part of the group, but just to stick at the back and not get too excited.
Leading them round that turn. So 19 athletes in that leading group.
Also, because
the pacemakers
at the front. Enos Kakopil from Kenya, making his full marathon debut. He's right alongside
leading them
the main pacemakers there, Edwin Kiptu, Frederick Kiptu as well. Should just mention also number 56, I know with Enos Kakopil 6. Enos Kakopil from Kenya, making his full marathon debut. He's right alongside the main pacemakers there.
Today it's his 11th marathon
as well.
Whereas the debutant,
number 56, Enos Kakopil,
running in his first race.
A little bit about
here we're looking at Michel Butter, another very experienced marathon runner, 34 years of age.
Marathon
doing the pacemaking for the second group, so some way behind the lead running Michel Butter in his first race. Alongside him, here we're looking at Michel Butter, another very experienced is here, marathon runner, 34 years of age, running his own race, doing the pacemaking for the second group, so some way behind the lead is Dusseldorf. Michel Butter 6 months ago. Alongside him, so Michel Butter, his compatriot is here, trying to help him, running his own race. He's got a best time of 2:16.58. Personal best time that would be if they can maintain that pace. So Michel Butter,
we should say also from a Dutch perspective, the qualification time for the Olympic Games in Tokyo next year for the men is 2:11:30
to a good time.
Well, of course,
personal best time that would be if they can maintain that pace
really looking
to the end.
The likes of we should say also from a Dutch perspective, the qualification time for the Olympic Games in Tokyo next year decided today for the men is 2:11:30. And for those of you who like to watch the national race unfold here, 2:29:30 is the qualification time for the women, the Dutch women, the national qualification time. That's well beyond them. So I think there's nothing going to be particularly decided today in terms of qualification for Tokyo. And for those of you who like to watch the national race unfold here, 2:29:30 kilometres is the qualification time. We will get our first glimpse, the Dutch women, of the Amstel River for Tokyo. And they will again turn sharp right, and they will be then along the towpath. And we'll see, well, so approaching 14 kilometres, and it's 14 kilometres of some of the, we will get our first glimpse proper of the Amstel River on the banks of the Amstel. They will again turn sharp right.
And I hope we're going to see some of the beautiful windmills on the banks of the Amstel.
Properties, Richard.
I've got friends here in Holland who are often down on the river, and
residences we
see the rowers
literally on the banks of the Amstel.
Amstel River.
Beautiful place to live.
Used for some of the big competitions. The beautiful windmills in Holland. The banks of the Amstel. Rowing nation. I've got friends here in Holland who are often down on the river, and there we see the rowers out on the Amstel River.
We may even
see some of the big competitions
later on
here in Holland.
Don't want to know what the flyboarders are.
You'll know as nation as well as a running nation.
It's quite a sight.
Many big sports, hockey. So 14 kilometres, and here we are. The runners have reached the banks of the Amstel. They'll stay on the river now.
You'll know as soon as you see them.
10 kilometres in this out and back stretch down to Oudekerk. 14 kilometres, and here we are. They reach at the 20 kilometres. Have reached the banks of the Amstel. They'll stay on the river now on the south side of the river. 10 kilometres back towards this out and back stretch district down to the Oudekerk Johan Cruyff Arena. They reach at 20 kilometres.
Motorway, by the way,
across the bridge,
the ring road, the A10, one of the main arteries,
south side of the river,
into and out of Amsterdam,
towards the business district,
underneath that on the way out, and again
Johan
on the way back.
Arena.
Big motorway, by the way, it's part of the ring road, the A10, Sunday main arteries in Amsterdam, into and out of Amsterdam. And we'll go underneath that on the way out.
We've heard talk that the organisers here in Amsterdam have been considering changing the course, trying to make it even faster
in Amsterdam
than it is. And one of the things under review, we've heard talk to take out organisers here in Amsterdam stretch along the river. Concern has been in recent years that when the weather hasn't been to make it even faster today than it is, and one of the the wind, the things under review means slower times. To take out, and organisers are always looking for along the river ways to make their course faster. Has been in recent years, it's possible that when the weather hasn't been quite as kind as it is today, this is where they are changing the course. That would be a bit of a pity in terms of seeing the slower times. And organisers are always looking for the ways to make their course faster. So it's possible that in the years ahead we might see a change in the course, and that would be a bit of a pity.
Left a picture have gone underneath the A10, the main
city, the windmills,
road,
and the
into and out of Amsterdam, and the green area left along the river there, which will be on the right-hand side of the runners, is the Amstel Park. You can see the runners left the picture have gone underneath the A10, the main road into and out of Amsterdam, and the green area from the boat camp, so we've got cameras, we've got angles covered all over the place here in Amsterdam today. This is the picture from the river itself. Look at that in Amsterdam, the side-on shot. And I also feel, Richard, it just gives us a really nice look at the individual camp. So we've got cameras, we've got angles covered all over the place here in Amsterdam today. This is the picture from the river itself. Look at that. The side-on shot.
A marathon pace of,
Richard, it just gives us a
4
really
minutes and 50
nice
seconds
look at the individual, the cadence of the runners, the individual styles.
Anyone to run at and to maintain that pace for. You can also see how fast they're moving. I think when we see them on the inside on, we just see how fast they're running, which is quite different from how we're seeing them now from behind for the mile. They approach the 15-kilometre. Anyone to run at and to maintain that pace.
Going through 15 kilometres in about 44:30.
When we see them on the inside on, we just see how fast they're running.
Outside course record pace at the moment.
How we're seeing them now from behind.
There we are.
As they approach the 15-kilometre.
I think you're a bit of a flyboarder aficionado. Talk us through this one. Going through 15 kilometres in about 44:30.
I've never done it. I don't think I'll ever do it, but I have.
Outside course
record. The only place I've seen it is here in Amsterdam.
There we are.
So that's about as much of an expert as I am. What I do see now is that they are that hose connecting into the shoes that they're wearing. I don't think I'll ever do it. The hose comes. The only place I've seen it is here in Amsterdam. So that's about as much as an expert as I am. What I do see now is Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes. That hose connects into the shoes that they're wearing.
Running his second marathon, Daniel
the hose comes with water being pumped through it. The experienced Kenyan athletes they're connected to, and then some of the Ethiopian, some of the leading Kenyan one of the Ethiopian athletes, interesting debutants there. Number 8, Chaga Abra Osman, running his second marathon. Daniel very talented Eritrean athlete has come from the track. The experienced Kenyan athletes. And then some of the Ethiopian Junior Championships. Eritrean athlete. One of the 8 years ago, over 3,000 metres, and has gradually moved up the distances. Very talented, had a great race. Eritrean athlete has come from the track race here in Holland 12 months ago when he finished the World Junior Championships Chalanga 8 years ago, over 3,000 metres, and has gradually moved up the distances. Had a great race, one of the famous sites, the Windmill 7 Hills race here in Holland 12 months ago when he finished second behind Joshua Chalanga, who won in Doha. Chris, I think that Windmill is still 10,000 metres. Well, there's one of the famous sites, the Windmill.
Great support actually at this particular part of the course, and of course the
almost 400 years old.
As always, will play their part, and goodness me, they played their part in Vienna last weekend on the Hauptallee in the Austrian capital to get Kipchoge home. Pacemakers still looking good, still working as a team part of the course, and of course still with Edward spectators, centre of picture, as always, will play their part, and goodness me, they played their part in Vienna, isn't there, which is last weekend on the Hauptallee, encouraging, cajoling the Austrian capital, making sure that his fellow pacemakers still looking good, job and they still working as a team. Still with Edward Kipchoge there, centre of picture, directing proceedings.
Quite strict rules about
communication, isn't there? Which is good to see.
Drinking and encouraging, cajoling. He's athlete to athlete.
Making sure that his fellow pacemakers know their job and they stick to it.
The pacemakers are not allowed. You see the athletes with their drink bottles. Quite strict rules about their drinks bottles, drinking and passing the other athletes who are finishing. In other words, the pacemakers, if you're not finishing the race, you're not allowed bottles, but the pacemakers are not allowed under athletes who are finishing the race to pass their
just a little update on
the other athletes who are finishing. In other words, if you're not finishing the race,
in the middle of that group, there he is, looking much more comfortable. And we just got a glimpse there of number 17, Leonard Korir, former Kenyan, now US. Just starting to drop off a little update off the back of that group. Abdi Nagay, right of picture, he's just out of shot. Very much now starting in the middle of that group, there he is, looking much more comfortable. And we just got a glimpse there of number 17, Leonard Korir, former Kenyan, now US.
Chris, you mentioned earlier
just starting to drop off the back of that group.
Gap between this leading group
right
and the second group
just out of
so
shot
big that
maybe
that forces many of the athletes to kind of make a gamble.
This pace.
And some of them then have to operate at a slightly faster pace than they want. Chris, you mentioned earlier, we talked about the weather, how important that is. The gap between this leading group and the second group is so big, but it's still that forces many of the athletes to kind of make a gamble. They often say some of them then have to operate at a slightly faster pace than they want. Well, We talked about the weather, how important that is. We've got 11 degrees. Temperature is creeping up. I think it's likely to creep up a few more degrees over the next couple of hours, but that still is the optimum conditions are 50 degrees in Fahrenheit. And that's about significant
for the amateur runners, the fun runners later on in the race.
But I think it's likely to creep up a few more degrees.
Really comfortable into his running now. Born in Somalia,
very nice
to the Netherlands at age 6 and stayed there here in the Netherlands for about 4 years.
Perhaps more significant for the amateur runners, the fun runners later on in the race.
But before returning to the Netherlands, before looking really comfortable into his running now. Born in Somalia, the nomadic label that he's got is entirely justified. Here are the women here in the Netherlands for about 4 years. 15 kilometres now back to Somalia. Just inside 50 minutes, returning to the Netherlands before 29. Well, again, we'll bring you the official split on 15 kilometres label that he's got for the women, but again, entirely justified. Here are the women spread out a little bit. 15 kilometres now as well. I'm not sure whether that would also be a factor. 50 minutes in the organisers. You mentioned them thinking about making changes. 29. Well, again, we'll bring you I agree, the official split on 15 kilometres. To shave more time off, but again, it is pretty narrow. Starting to spread out a little bit.
It is, and we saw that there in that leading women's
that would also be a factor, Richard, in the organisers. You mentioned them thinking about making changes.
The top women in the race,
I agree, alongside their pacemakers, but also alongside more time off. But it is pretty narrow
who are aiming
on the back of the Amstel.
It is, and we saw that there in that leading women's group, because you've got the women's front group, the top women in that men's group, alongside their pacemakers, but also alongside. So as you say, quite narrow, who are aiming themselves for that 2:20-2:22 finishing time. Interesting to see. It's the women's front group. She's as big as that men's group, like Abdi Nagaya, coached by Patrick Sang, part of that. So as you say, quite narrow group, but in Kapsabet, they're moving along nicely. Interesting to see. Lynette Masai,
different
she's also
terrain, of course,
like Abdi Nagaya, coached by Patrick Sang, part of that
trails up in the Great Rift Valley
group in Kapsabet.
Here, of course, running today on tarmac, but a nice, pleasant surface. Yeah, very different terrain, of course. We saw earlier on play a part as well. Ochre red technology. Trails up in the
what a view he's got.
Valley. This Amsterdam Marathon unfolding. Running today on
there's the hose, Chris, tarmac. If you want to know how it works.
A nice, pleasant surface.
That's where they get their power.
And of course, the shoes. And again, just to stress how quickly these guys are running. This is the elite.
What a view he's got.
This Amsterdam Marathon unfolding just outside 30 miles
Chris,
an hour,
if you want to know how it works.
Kilometres an hour.
That's where they get their power.
For as long as they do is quite extraordinary. There is the aforementioned number 56 there. These guys are running from Kenya men's group.
So back to the front of the women's race.
13 miles an hour, 21
just running behind Maria Ionescu,
as long as they do,
who's
quite extraordinary. There's the
in the middle there,
number 56 there, the debutant from Kenya.
Ethiopian pacemaker. So back to the front of the women's race. Mimi Bellata, last year running behind. She's also Maria just off the back of who's on the pacemaker. In the middle there, pacemakers, and as we've seen before, Ethiopian pacemaker, Ethiopian F5, sorry, F15, I think that's Degitu as the second placer. She's also just young off the back, 20-year-old, making on the shoulder here in Amsterdam. Pacemakers, and as we've seen before.
So both groups, the leading men and the leading women, both safely through 15 kilometres. There'll be a few more kilometres to go until the most southerly point of the course.
20-year-old
almost exactly 20 kilometres just before halfway. And they'll turn it. So both groups, the leading men and the leading women, both safely through 15 kilometres. There'll be way back on a few more kilometres to go until the most southerly point of the course. That's almost exactly 20 kilometres just before halfway. Just that little turn at gap, which we're not concerned at all about. Over the Amstel, giving himself a little bit of breathing space on the opposite side of the river, at the back of that group. Turns towards the centre of. He's packed a lot into his 30 years, hasn't he, in terms of his travel and where he's based. Again, just that little quite an extraordinary story,
gap,
just from a human concern at all
he's a great guy.
just to give himself a little bit of
you talked
breathing
about him
space
as being a bit of a nomad
at the back of that
I
group.
know that
It's been
he has done some training.
He's packed a lot into his 30
in
years,
Ethiopia,
in terms of his travel and where he's based.
It's
quite an extraordinary
did some
story
training with human power at one stage, but I mean he's a great guy. I think now. You talked about him as being a bit of a nomad, and I know that I think he has done some training and seems to be very happy there. You can see that his results, I think, have borne fruit. Did some training with Mo Farah at one stage, over the half marathon earlier this year in Marugame with 60:24. And he's now really starting to think of himself as there, and we can see that his results in that top bracket have borne fruit. I mean, he ran achievement for him, fastest time to make the podium marathon earlier this year. I know people talked about him. 60:24, and he's now really which would be a huge achievement of himself as, but so often we've seen him in Amsterdam, be a huge achievement for a time here to make the podium. Some great things. He achieved his Olympic qualifying time here in Amsterdam, possible winner, which would be 4 years ago, and then came back last year. So often we've seen him in Amsterdam. Just going for a time, but he's achieved some great just about time. He achieved his Olympic qualifying time he can here in Amsterdam, at least get on the podium. 4 years ago, and sensibly and controlled. Came back last year and ran
there he is at the back of the group there, centre of picture, and the ethos, the work not just about ethic that is laid down by Patrick San and that group. Whether he can, it's a really get on the podium group, isn't it? And there are no egos at all, including the great Eliud Kipchoge. We were saying yesterday at the back of the group there in Vienna that centre of picture take their turn, and the ethos, the work, menial tasks, ethic that is laid down by Patrick San and that group. It's a really close-knit group, isn't it? However big you are, however big the name, the great Eliud Kipchoge. Everybody takes their turn. We were saying yesterday and last weekend in Vienna that it's a really close-knit group where everybody doing menial plays a role. Menial for many people, chopping vegetables, even that's a rota for cleaning the toilets, and feeds into however big you are, however big the name. Everybody takes their turn. Patrick San. So to be part of that group, well, for goodness sake, it's a really close-knit group. The world record in the marathon and the world record in the half marathon. Nobody is more important than the other. And that's two of your training partners. That's pretty feeds into why that group is so successful.
No one is
the tutelage of Patrick San. So to be part of that group, for goodness sake, Richard, to have the world record holder in the marathon and the world record in the half marathon as your two training partners, two of your help each other. And I think that's pretty special.
Obviously, they work together. Success. No one has superior to the other. So many others, including that's not just in the duties. No surprise why attitude stay part of that group. They help each other, and I think
it's a terrific formula.
Obviously, Kipchoge's success
in some luxury, just a few kilometres away from Captivet, but chooses to stay with the group.
No surprise why he wants to stay part of that group.
Because it's important to be part of the it's a terrific formula. Of course, Kipchoge himself lives through 19 kilometres then, approaching just a few kilometres just a kilometre away from that. But turning over the Amstel, they'll take a left turn over the bridge and luxurious surroundings, double back on themselves of the training group. And psychologically, that means they'll be through 19 kilometres then, approaching the 20k mark, bridge they're going just a kilometre away from turning over the Amstel. They'll take a left turn over the bridge and then they'll
and probably
double back on themselves.
Old village.
And psychologically, that means they'll be very close to the second half of the race. There is the bridge that they're going to
whether we're going to see the church, which gives the village its name. Well known in Amsterdam, as we've seen already with the windmills. It's a very much of village history is traced back to Ouderkerk, the 17th century. I'm not sure whether we're going to see the church, which gives the village its name. There we are. But at the turnaround point, as we've seen already with the windmills, so much of Holland's history is traced back to
any headwind, any head breeze, as we've been describing it in these last 5 or 6 kilometres that they've had.
There we are.
Will now
at the turnaround point
disappear as they do a sharp 180-degree turn. First of all, over the bridge here at Ouderkerk. And so any headwind, any head breeze, as we've been describing it in these last to make their way back 5 or 6 kilometres the opposite side of the Amstel, will now start their way back north. Disappear as they do a sharp milestone, of course, degree turn. First of all, over the bridge here after that at Ouderkerk, and then another halfway split. Left hand again.
And it is interesting just watching Nagea at the back of that group. Sometimes He is about
their way back
3 or 4 metres back.
And the next milestone, of course, will be 20 kilometres,
and then
quickly after that,
particularly there at the turns when the group
split.
has to just naturally slow down.
It is interesting just
watching Negea. He can just catch up sometimes. He is about and then 3 or 4 metres back part of the group. So the group. And Negea really showing his experience, particularly there at the turns when the group has taken advantage, naturally slow down as it goes around by the group. He can just catch up those, but not getting at all and then feel very much right at the front part of the group. So Negea really showing his experience. The debutant in the orange vest, number 56, taking advantage of the pace that's being set by the group, keying off them. Mentioned then, but not getting at all involved. Right at the front of that group, has the second fastest time in the field. We're seeing from the debutant in the orange vest, number 56, 6 years ago.
So approaching the 20-kilometre mark, they mentioned the black arch.
Bernard Koech.
They will cross under. Here it is.
Has the second fastest time in the field.
20k split.
Under 2 hours and 5 minutes in Dubai 6 years ago.
So comfortably inside the 60 minutes. The 20-kilometre mark. They can see the black arch. 9:48. They will cross under. Here it is. So we'll give you an unofficial 20k split. I should also explain there are 10 tables on there for comfortably inside the 60 minutes. Athletes technical meeting, the briefing yesterday, 9:48. The number will designate which table they get their drink from.
So another of the well-known windmills.
Should also explain there are 10 tables on there for drinks. We were at the athletes technical meeting, the briefing yesterday. The number will designate which table they get their drink from.
Almost 400 years old. So another of the well-known windmills. I think we translate that as the Swan windmill, Det Swan. So one of the Kenyan athletes, another of the famous possibly starting to struggle a little bit. Lucas Rotich, years old. But the drink stations often starts to put gaps between athletes. So one of the question is whether it's Kenyan a serious gap, possibly starting to struggle a little bit. Lucas Rotich, caused by how the athletes pick up their drinks. But I think, Chris, you were mentioning about how narrow this starts to put gaps between athletes, and we saw that very definitely. Is whether it's the athletes serious gap their drinks at the fourth drink station, 20 kilometres, just being caused by there was a little bit of pushing and pick up their drinks. But I think, Chris, you were mentioning about how narrow this Lucas Rotich, number 9, and we saw that it does very definitely there as the athletes got it there. 10 or 15 metres to catch up, 20 kilometres. He's going to. That there was a little bit of pushing and shoving, and still about 16 athletes, I think, in that. And leading group Lucas Rotich, number 9.
Official 20-kilometre split there. You can see 59.50, so they are appreciably
10 or 15 metres to catch up.
Lawrence Chirono's course record from last year.
Contact with the group.
Again, that gap
still about from 16 athletes, I think, in that leading group being led by the pacemakers.
Down and quite wide. Official 20-kilometre split there. You can see 59.50, so they are appreciably latch onto the back of Chirono's course record from last year. To take on board liquid and fluid from Abdi, clearly very important to sustain this sort of effort throughout 42 kilometres, taking on plenty of fluid. And the physical act of doing it, Richard, is so underestimated. You think back to the likes of Mo Farah when he made the transition from track to take on board liquid and fluid. He said he knew clearly very important part to sustain this sort of effort throughout 42 kilometres. But terribly wrong. The physical act of doing it, Richard, is so underestimated, and couldn't find the right drink. Had to go back when he made the transition from track. I remember at one point with the officials saying, look, he said he knew it was an important part, frankly, a bit of a mess, and he realised after the experience that actually it doesn't matter how fit you are, even in his second marathon finely tuned all the altitude training, find the right drink, had to go back component part of running a marathon. I remember is the ability of officials saying, look, find your drink, the right bottle, and pick it up and drink. It was actually, frankly, watching a bit of a mess, in his first few marathons, and I was always amazed fit you are, that he hadn't finely tuned all the altitude training. A really important component part of running a marathon how to do that. I remember when I moved up to the marathon, I was pick it up and drink it. I remember watching the drinks table out on his first few marathons, and I was always amazed. Practice it. So here we go. He hadn't halfway and perfected, or he hadn't sort of
the athletes are certainly going a little bit slower than we were expecting. We were expecting a halfway split of around 62 drinks table out on the training routes like they used to run on just outside it. So here we go.
Yeah, we'll bring you a halfway split as soon as we get that officially done. But I think you're right.
The athletes are certainly going a little bit slower than we were expecting. We were expecting a halfway split of around 62.30
kilometres per minute were absolutely metronomic, around
just outside
2:55 down to 2:54. We'll bring you a halfway split. Only one of his kilometres as soon as we get that officially done. But I think you're right. 3:02. 3:02 again last year went through in 62:11 last year. And his kilometres per minute were absolutely metronomic,
so
around
back to the
2:55 down to 2:54.
Only
one of his kilometres was
the bridge
was at 3:02.
Still
he was in fine form last year.
Or 9 elite women in that group. So back to the pacemakers women's race, and they're approaching the male runners. The bridge at Audica, Mimi Bellata still been right at the front of that group. 8 from the start. 9 running just off the shoulder of women in that group. Marios Ionescu, the pacemaker, and some of the other male runners.
Yeah, all
Mimi
the main
Bellata
protagonists are in there as they hit the bridge, they cross the Amstel
from the start,
and they will hit the
running just off the shoulder
20-kilometre mark very shortly.
Marios Ionescu, the pacemaker.
Glimpse of some of the other runners, of course. Plenty of opportunities if you're a decent club runner are in there as they hit the bridge and they cross the Amstel marathon runner, and they will hit the well, is that first sign that Abdi is starting to lose touch with this group. Glimpse going through in exactly some of the other runners, of course. Plenty of opportunities if you're a decent club runner.
Yes, so quite a lot slower than we were expecting, and then what the organisers
well, is that the first sign that Abdi is starting to lose touch with this group?
But,
going through
it's still possible that they could cut that fast. I think one of the factors, if they are to do that, quite is going to be how far we were expecting. Pacemakers, what the organisers talked about had Edwin Kiptu's role as the chief pacemaker, if you like. He's now fast, taken over right at the front of the race. Well, here's Abdi Nagea. If they are to do that, is going to be how far these pacemakers, and he's asking the motorbike camera to give him a bit more space. The role as the question really is whether he can now close that, taken over right at the front of the race. Well, here's Abdi Nagea.
5 seconds question is the rest of the group. He was through halfway.
He's just a question.
We flagged it up, didn't we? Very early in the race
to give him a bit more space.
If he did get dropped, the question really is whether he can place, isn't it? You've been there, I've been there, where you're not part of a group. Whatever time you're running, 5 seconds off the rest of the group. He was through halfway, and it's just a question. And we flagged it up, didn't we? Very early in the race.
There, just approaching now 20 kilometres.
It's a lonely place, isn't it? You've been there, I've been there, where you're not part of a group. Whatever time you're running.
1:06:20
to be right out in isolation,
and to me that looks like they're the women's certainly on schedule race. They're just approaching now 20 kilometres. They were hoping to go through halfway. They're going to go through 20 kilometres. 1:06:20. There's a good example of how not to me that looks like they're drinks bottle certainly on schedule for. You don't really want to be losing a few seconds, and you certainly don't want to lose your stride in. But 17:30 at the men's race. There's a good example right of the screen there to pick up your Edwin Kiptu's bottle.
And we're down to 2 pacemakers now.
Really want to be losing
of the 3.
A few seconds.
The other Kiptu, Frederick, has dropped out. So it's now Kiptu and Edwin Kiptu and
the men's race on the right of the screen there. Edwin Kiptu in terms
of pacing. And we're down to 2 pacemakers now, it's worth saying.
Well, I reckon that
the other
women are more likely to
has dropped out, so it's now
the course record. There's been a lot of talk.
Edwin Kiptu and Noah
it's been 7 years since
leading the way.
There's been a course record in the women's race here in Amsterdam. You have to go back to a lot about course records. Well, I reckon that winning performance the women are more likely to. I think that the course record. There's been a lot of talk. The strength of that women's field and the way they're running much more sensibly than last year. There's been a course record in the women's race here in Amsterdam. You have to go back to measure getting close to that 2:21:09 time. But I think that
worrying from a Dutch perspective, because that gap is getting bigger and bigger between this main group here, who are now back on the right-hand bank of the Amstel, making their way north
towards the centre of Amsterdam.
Getting close to that 2:21.09
well, that gap I reckon now
time.
is 20 metres plus.
Worrying from a Dutch perspective,
leading
because
group,
that gap is getting bigger and bigger between
this main group
there
here,
he is,
who are now back on the right-hand bank of the Amstel, making their way north.
Keep them in his
towards the centre of Amsterdam.
Foreshortening there. That is a gap
well, that gap I reckon now is
20 metres plus
between this leading group.
Yes, I think the hope for Abdi is that he can sort of come through this.
He's got to make sure that he can just
I think we can only describe it as a bad patch because
even allowing for the
been talking of staying with that leading group for as long as possible.
Slightly bigger.
So I don't think this will have been part of his race plan.
Yes, I think
the hope for Abdi is that he can sort of come through this bad patch. Then it's probably best for him to. I think we can only describe it as a bad patch because he'd been talking of staying with that leading group for as long as possible. So I don't think this will have been part of his race plan, but at the same time, he's got lots of experience, and if he is having a bad patch, then it's probably best for him to try and recover,
kilometres,
keep his rhythm,
and just under 10 kilometres time, the real racing will start. That's for sure.
The leaders.
Still plenty of big names in there, as you would expect. It's what happens from 30k onwards. 23 kilometres. Well, I hope you're enjoying these. Just under 10 kilometres time, brilliant. The real racing will start. That's for sure. Cruising along, still plenty of big names in there, giving us plenty of, as you would expect, shots. It's what happens from 30k onwards. This wonderful race, and it becomes interesting. The mass starting to come through. There is Abdi, brilliant boat record holder, cruising along the Amstel itself. Still looking okay, plenty of, even though he's been shot, set adrift, Richard, from that main group. He's still looking pretty comfortable.
He's got a very nice, smooth running action.
There is Abdi,
nice
record holder
action, and yes, I think you're right. If he can keep the rhythm going,
still looking
another
okay.
Kenyan athlete,
even though he's
just dropped off that leading group,
Richard, from that main group, he's still
got
looking
someone
pretty
to. He's got a very nice. The women go through a smooth running action. Well, they are actually marathon runners ahead. And yes, I think you're right. If he can keep the rhythm going. There's another Kenyan athlete who's just dropped off that leading group, that would bring them home. At least he's got someone to target. As the women go through
than the course record.
Halfway,
yeah, they are
significantly
quicker
ahead of
Nazareth Hailu.
Course record
2012,
schedule.
You mentioned there the course record holder went through in 71:15.
So that would bring them
back
home
in 2012. So we'll bring you confirmation of that.
A minute faster than the course record
for the women. Yeah, they are just outside 70 minutes. Significantly quicker. On course. Nazareth Hailu, back in 2012, you mentioned there the course record holder went through in 71:15.
Just getting smaller and smaller.
Back in 2012. So we'll bring you confirmation of that halfway split for the women, but it was just outside 70 minutes. So they
of the athletes
on course for a course record.
Kenyan athlete Nicholas Rotich, who's that leading struggling to stay with the leaders, just getting smaller
and this is significant, isn't it, Richard? You mentioned that really it's all about having a target, and the target, the obvious target for Abdi at the moment is the man in front of him, Nicholas Rotich. And if you can just pick him off, and then maybe hope that one of the others in that main group also starts to struggle, and then he can start to pick him off as well. Richard, you mentioned that really it's all about having a target, the two athletes. The obvious target for Abdi at the moment is the man in front of him, team members of Nicholas Rotich. And if you can just pick him off, so they know each other well, hope that one of the others in that main group also starts as a pair. And then he can start to reel in that leading group. A little bit of communication there between the two athletes. If this gap doesn't get too big, there'll be other people in that main group, team members as well, of course. They train together, so they know each other well. And if they can start working together, perhaps as a faster pace, that these two can't start to reel in that leading group, but
that gap will get bigger. They can stay together.
And I think Abdi is aware. There'll be other people in that main group who will also, as much as he can enjoy the company both ways, one of his training partners from the NLB running team at a faster pace that these two can't maintain, which is about that gap will get bigger. 25-30 metres, they can stay together down the road. Abdi is aware of that gap gets as much as he can enjoy the company of one of his training partners from the NN running team. Back under the A10, the ring road,
on that
leading out of Amsterdam. So they've made light work of that, and just the other side of this motorway,
any bigger.
Decent crowds, of course, as well, using every 24 kilometres. They'll hit the 25 under the A10, the ring road.
Well, there's the British athlete,
in and out
Ross
of
Skelton.
Amsterdam. So they've made light work of that, and just the other side of this
he's probably aiming
motorway.
For around 2:20. And we said that the
crowds,
women
of course,
went
as well, using
bang
every
on that schedule halfway.
25 kilometres
70:01. Well, there's the British athlete, Ross Skelton. A designated he's got his own schedule to work to. I think he's probably aiming for around 2:20, and we said that he's probably aware that they went through a little bit faster schedule halfway was asked for by the organisers. Says Ionescu, a designated pacemaker in the race. Marius Ionescu, another wearing number 23, maybe 15 kilometres. And he's probably aware these women, that they went through a little bit faster. Big group than was asked for by the organisers. So Ionescu, there's a good chance that he's going to stay in the race for another Gebru, 10, maybe 15 kilometres, helping these women. But it's still a very big group of
so approaching 25 kilometres in the men's race here in Amsterdam. And just a sense here that one of the pacemakers, Noah Kipkemboy there, on the left of the picture, just starting to open his stride a little bit more. And that group, you know, is starting just to splinter a little bit. So approaching 25 kilometres in the men's race here in Amsterdam. And they're really starting to put down the hammer here that one of the pacemakers, Noah Kipkemboy there, Daniel Kemboy, left the picture, just starting to open his stride a little bit more. And that group, you know, is starting just to splinter a little bit. And of course Kenya, not quite as compact as it was before. 15 of the last 17 years to put down the hammer here have been won by Kenyans. For 14 of the two inevitably. Daniel Kemboy is just behind the two pacemakers. We've got Bernard Koech, also Kenyan, with his training partner, has dominated this race. 15 of the last 17 years in the men's race have been won by Kenyans.
We might see as they go through 25k, how far back those two athletes are. A nice overhead shot.
Dutchman
through 25k, 1:14.26.
Alongside
well, that gap.
Just try and get confirmation of how big that gap is.
Yes, we might see as they go through 25k now, how far back this part of the course those two athletes are. A nice overhead just turn the corner. Abdi Nagaya is going to actually lose side. So that's about 26. Well, that gap 17, 18 seconds seems to be quite big now. Just over 100 metres, and this part of the course getting some advice from where they just turn the corner. Abdi Nagaya is going to actually lose sight. But so that is now quite a big gap. 17, 18 we're in this section of the course as they head towards the business district, where just over 100 metres number of getting some spectators on the course. They've really got to run their own motorbike riders, stay focused. But that is now quite a big gap, and hopefully in this section of the course as they head towards the business district, where probably the fewest number in now, but spectators on the course. Make his way back towards the leaders, run their own race, stay focused. Leading group, and is now starting to splinter. Edwin Kiptu hopefully will come out of that ride at the front. That bad patch that he's probably in now. I think we've lost the to try and the other make his way back, so it is just down to Chris, as you were saying, that leading group.
Yeah, three pacemakers down to one now.
Edwin Kiptu,
as they
experienced pacemaker right at the front.
The 26-kilometre mark, and these next 10 kilometres, because once they hit 35,
I think we've lost
it really heralds the start of the,
so it is just
the home straight, if you like, the last 7 kilometres, where possibly three pacemakers down to one now. And there's confirmation of the 25k split, 26-kilometre mark. And these next 10 kilometres, because once they hit 35, it really heralds the start of the home straight, if you like, the last 7 kilometres, where course record possibly they'll have a little bit of a tailwind last year. There's confirmation of the 25k split, course record pace. 64 in contrast to the women, who are comfortably inside the wins, and that compares.
Yes, so
63.49
outside.
Course record set by Lawrence Chirono's last year. So they're schedule about 40 seconds outside course record pace.
Course record set last year,
in contrast to the women, who are comfortably inside the wins.
Eritrean Osman is in that leading group. Number 18, Chirono's course record schedule. Vincent Kipchumba has come into this race. Course record set last year, as we said. Big win in Vienna earlier this year. Eritrean there. Abra Osman is 56 leading group, so he definitely 18, as is one of the favourites, has come into this race. If he can repeat his a big win from earlier this year, ran his PB there. 2:06.56.
Still, of course, so going about its business on a Sunday morning.
One of the favourites.
26 kilometres now through.
Victory from earlier this year.
To take on fuel. Of these Amsterdam, I'm sure at this stage. Of course, going about its business on a Sunday morning. All the big names are in there. Dick Caesar, number 3, was third last year. 26 kilometres now through from Kenya. Another opportunity to take on fuel. There he is, just on the shoulder of the pacemaker. Of these, I'm sure, is about 100 metres or so. So all the big names are in there. Dick Caesar,
Number 3, Chumba we just saw as well. Last year, Bernard Koech. Abraham Osman from Kenya. So in the Roglic, we saw a glimpse of him there. There he is, just on the shoulder of the pacemaker. So then again, we think he's just picking up his meters or so off this
just beyond 25 kilometres.
So you can actually see, Richard, that the second pacemaker, Abraham Osman, has dropped back also and is now essentially pacing the 2 athletes who are off this leading group.
Well, that could be Abdi just picking up his drink at just beyond 25 kilometres, getting back.
You can actually see, Richard,
contact with this group, or at least give him some hope of picking off the athletes
now essentially pacing
as they drop off this group, which you can see now is happening. Well, that could be a big help for Negea. Really stretches some chance of doing a great job in contact with this group, or at least give him some hope of picking off the athletes as they drop off this group, which you can see now
25 kilometres right of picture.
Kiptu
with their dedicated pacemakers doing a terrific job.
Doing a great job.
The main names, the big names in the women's race are still in there, and they are inside course record pace. So women approaching there, isn't it? 25 kilometres right of picture. 6 or so. We obviously got some with their dedicated pacemakers doing a terrific job as well as the pacemakers. But in terms of the elite women, names in the women's race are still in there. 7 or 8, maybe 9 inside of the top course record still in there together. So that's quite a group there, isn't it?
Yes, right in the middle of that group, we're just seeing 6 or so.
We've obviously got some excellent elite men in there as well, one of the company as well as the pacemakers. But in terms of the elite women, we've got a group there of about 7 or 8, maybe 9 of the top women, all still in there
yesterday in her
right in the
middle of that group. We're just seeing F2 Maicho, which is right in the north of Ethiopia. She's definitely one of the favourites. Very high altitude. She came her training ground here last year, above 3,000 metres. Training really well. Has come into this race yesterday in with her home region. Great performance in Maicho, which is right in the north of Ethiopia, where she ran very high altitude 222.52 training ground. Above 3,000 metres. The men's race has come into this race with a great performance.
Well, we're down to a group of 8 or 9 now. And the latest to be dropped, or at least finding it tough there, is number 16, Tesfa Getahun, the youngster from Ethiopia. Oh no, he's still there. I beg his pardon, he's still there. We're down to a group of 8 or 9 now, and the latest to be dropped, or at least finding it tough here last year. So there's number 16, still Betesfa Getahun, part of this leading youngster from Ethiopia, doing a terrific job there. I know he's still there. I beg his pardon, he's still there alongside
that typical grimace that we've seen so often in his races.
3, who was 3rd here last year.
So last year.
Still,
as he battled his way to a third-place finish. I saw it in Mumbai,
doing a terrific job
back at the start of 2018 when he won Dixita. His first typical grimace that we've seen so often in his races. Dixita, we saw it last year. 3 Ethiopians battled his way to a third-place finish. I saw it in Mumbai. Number 7 in the blue vest at the start of 2018 when he won. Had a great race here last year. Big city race. Only faded really in the last 5k when he got a stitch. 3 Ethiopians in that group headed back also past the Rice Museum. Number 7 in the blue vest, Tadu Abata. 3 had Ethiopians a great race here last year. 5 Kenyans only running faded behind the last 5k when he got a stitch as they headed back past Rice Museum.
Looking smooth, isn't he? Tall athlete.
3 Ethiopians last year. 5 Kenyans running behind.
We may not see it today.
Edwin Kiptu.
He has a very interesting, entertaining victory celebration.
There's Tadu Abata,
which we saw in Hamburg. You mentioned those filthy conditions. And there he is, look, just as we start speaking about him, he just moves ahead and is now just slipstreaming behind the pacemaker. He has a very interesting, entertaining victory celebration. Athletes in that field we saw in Hamburg. You mentioned those filthy conditions.
An update
there
on the weather.
Just as we start speaking about him, he just moves ahead and is now just streaming behind the pacemaker.
At the moment, that is still very good, very low wind.
Athletes in that field.
Very little wind. 3 miles an hour from the southeast. 12 degrees. As we said, organisers were hoping. There was some talk of the wind direction changing. That is still later this morning. Very good, very low wind to an easterly direction, which would be a huge help as the very little wind. 3 miles an hour from the southeast. In the last 7 kilometres. The organisers were hoping. Leading group. There was some talk of the wind direction changing later this morning. I've seen this so many times in Amsterdam, easterly direction, which would be a huge help as the runners turn west, as though he's focusing on 7 kilometres, getting the athletes through leading 30k. Well, 5 kilometres further back, the women going through 25k. So many times in Amsterdam. Edwin Kiptu,
women through 25k in almost exactly 1:23
pacemaker.
It
looks as though
over a minute
he's focusing on
course record pace,
getting the athletes
in the women's race.
30k.
So the story in Amsterdam in 2019, as this race
going through
approaches
25K.
the latter stages, is women through 25k in almost exactly 1:23. They're still
number 6,
over a minute inside course record pace in the women's race. So the story in Amsterdam in 2019,
who's actually dropped back,
as this race approaches the latter stages, is that we could be heading for a new course record in the women's race.
Back Negea, number 6, the leaders, but running with Negea, pacemaker. Well, he's got the assistance of a pacemaker, who's actually dropped back, and you can see that gap now is about that gap. I would estimate 250-300 metres.
Well, this is the size of the gap
the leaders, but
Abdi Negea.
Well, he's got the assistance of a pacemaker.
He will have half a chance with the pacemaker on his shoulder. It's also worth mentioning that Nicholas Rotic, who he was running with for a while, isn't with him anymore. So Abdi is now this is the size of the gap facing dedicated pacemaker Abdi Negea. And it's an appreciable one, but he will have half a chance with the pacemaker on his shoulder. It's also worth mentioning 9 athletes who he was running leading group for a while isn't with him anymore. So Abdi is now just with the dedicated pacemaker Noah Kipkemboi.
Number 11, Maurice Gachaga, running his 2nd marathon, has run 16 half marathons.
So
in
9
his career,
athletes
started out
in
as
this leading group,
10k
alongside the pacemaker
roadrunner.
Edwin Kiptu.
Has had huge success in Cape Town over the last 3 years. Maurice Gachaga, he's won that big 12-kilometre race, has run 16 3-time marathons and won it again this year in 2019. So there's our 10k leading group, roadrunner. Diksisa of Ethiopia, Tadu Abata of Ethiopia, over the last 3 years, he's won that big 12-kilometre race. So 4 Ethiopians and won it again this year in 2019. So there's our leading group following the Kenyan pacemaker of Ethiopia, Tadu Abata of Ethiopia.
2 more athletes, as you can see, have dropped off that group quite appreciably. They will provide, there they are, they will provide the next target, if you like, for Abdi, if you can start to try and get back to them.
The Kenyan pacemaker Edwin Kiptu.
2 more athletes, as you can see, have dropped off that group quite appreciably. They will provide, he's doing a fine job, isn't he? They will provide the next target, nothing like having just somebody to drive you on, to try and get back to them. It looks as though Abdi is going to be able to reel in one of the runners who was part of that original group of 9. There he is. He's doing a fine job, isn't he, Noah Kipkemboi? Nothing like having just somebody to drive you on.
Elite women's,
and it looks as though Abdi is going to be able to
very big
to reel in one of the runners who was part of that original group of 9.
There's Walkinish Alamu, F8. Well, that elite women's group is still very 25k big. And drink station. Well, they're just beyond 25k by their pacemakers. So important for the women to get their drinks bottles. There's Walkinish Alamu, F8.
Yeah, that was a bit untidy, wasn't it?
Shashu in cases. Ooh, and this is
so important to take on fluid.
Drink station. Well, they're just beyond 25k, but you know, that's so the size of that group is not making it easy for them to bottles, identify their bit of congestion and reach the table.
That was a bit untidy, wasn't it? In certain cases, so important to take on fluid.
It looks like most of them have got the bottles. I just wonder if it's, you know, that the size of that group is not making it easy for them to identify their bottles and reach the table. And meanwhile, you can see how quiet this stretch of the course is as they head up towards 30k. Shashu in Sermu.
Yeah, just coming through another of the parks, Fencer Park, a smaller park.
And meanwhile,
in Amsterdam, approaching the 30-kilometre mark, and it's at this point that we may well see this group of 9 start to splinter further. Who's going to make a move, and for how long? Yeah, just coming through. Will Edwin Kiptu stay in the race? Will he? Fencer Park, smaller park. draw
in
a line
Amsterdam approaching the 30-kilometre mark, and it's at this point that we may well see
if he goes beyond
this
30K.
group of 9 start to splinter further. Who is going to make a move?
As an athlete in this race,
and
if
for how
you've
long,
got a pacemaker
who takes you
to 25, you're
stay
happy.
in the race?
If you've got
Will he
a pacemaker who's going to
draw
take
a
you
line
to
at
30, you're more
30K,
than
or will he
happy.
continue?
So I think that the
I'd be very
athletes behind him will be
30K.
I mean, expecting
as
that Kiptoo
as
an
will
athlete in this race, if you've
step
got a
aside,
pacemaker, I suppose the only thing that
25,
they might be hoping is that because the pacemaker is going to take a little bit slower,
you're more than happy.
So I think that
was
the
predicted
athletes behind him will be half. It may be expecting that Kiptoo will have the energy to step aside. I suppose the only thing that they might be hoping is that because the pace was a little bit slower than was predicted. Perhaps make sure that they get back on schedule. Kiptoo, he'll have got the energy to keep going for a few more kilometres. 25k that they've already passed, and now they're getting very close to that 30k point. Really striding out.
I think he's picked it up, you know, Richard. I think he's gained some time here. They were over 30 seconds
make sure
outside
that they get
course
back
record
on
pace
schedule.
early in the race.
He'll have got
we'll bring you a 30k split, but they're not far
the
off,
25k that they've already passed, and now they're getting very close to that 30k point.
28.58. I think he's picked it up, you know, Richard. I think he's gained some time here. They were over 30 seconds outside course record pace early in the race.
And they're through 30k.
We'll bring you a 30k split.
Is saying,
not
I've
far
done my
off,
work. It's all up to you now.
30k split was 128.58.
Well, that is,
and he's got them pretty much back on track here. Well,
given the time to reach and 30k was through 30k shy of it, only because is saying I've done my work. Slow for it's all up to you now. And here we are. This is the second group. That professional pacemaker, Ken Boy, the second pacemaker. Given the time to reach and 30k, was a few seconds shy of it, only because they were looking at about for 55 seconds the gap between. This is the leaders' second group and Noah Kipkemboy, the second pacemaker.
Yeah, he's doing well, and again, it's just a question of whether Noah Kipkemboy, the second pacemaker, will he continue and try and drag Abdi around a little bit further, or will he think, no, my work is done? And the answer to that is the latter. He's on his own now, Abdi. He's doing well, and again, all the pacemaking duties are complete in the men's race. Kipkemboy, the second pacemaker, will he continue and try and drag Abdi in the men's race? We should really pay tribute to, no, my work is done. Kiptoo, who's done a fine job there. The latter. He's on his own now, right back on schedule, just outside course record pace. So the duties are complete in the men's race. Here we are. Confirmation of that. Through some terrific pacemaking in the men's race, we should really pay tribute to 129.05, who's done a fine job there. That leading group of 9 going through 30K. He's put them right back on schedule, just outside course record pace. So the women inside course record. Here we are.
And this is where the race is over the last 12 kilometres.
And they're just simply 10 seconds now outside course record. 129.05.
Leading athletes we've been talking about, Solomon Dixis is there, Tadu Abata is there, Bernard Koech of Kenya is there, Elisha Rotic, Kenyans. And this is where the race is over the last 12 kilometres, 20 seconds down. And some of those leading athletes we've been talking about, Solomon Dixis is there, Tadu Abata is there, Bernard Koech of Kenya is there, we'll have Elisha Rotic, we can just see. And the debutant, Abra Osman, 20 seconds just over 100 metres down the road on the leaders, the leading group. So
yeah, Abdi, 53 seconds down.
He'll be an athlete
at 30 kilometres, so that's
have
the
his
gap
eyes
we've got
on.
to keep an eye on.
We can just see
here.
That,
so no pacemakers now.
About
their job
just over 100 metres down the road.
Elisa Rotic then,
from the
leaders. The racing starts. There is Abdi, of course. He's lost 53 seconds dedicated pacemaker, but he has moved ahead. So that's the gap we've got to keep an eye on. Wearing number 19, that is so no pacemakers now. Still looking pretty comfortable. Their job. He's almost a minute down. And it's still Rotic then, full of the racing starts. There is Abdi, of course. He's lost his dedicated pacemaker, but he has moved ahead
how fast
of the athlete
wearing
number 19. That is Asmari. Still looking pretty comfortable, isn't he? He's almost a minute down, but he's still looking full of running.
We've talked about him. These spectators are just going to show us exactly how fast with those leading athletes are running at. Well, Nagea, number 5, ran his best time in Rotterdam 6 months ago, and even in Rotterdam, we've talked about him when he had hamstring problems, his last 6 marathons, and yet managed to hang on with the best time of 2:06 first half in Rotterdam. Well, to Nagea, ran his best time in Rotterdam 6 months ago, and even in Rotterdam 2:06:17. He had hamstring problems. Be able to repeat that here this year to hang on, but after a very, very fast first half in Rotterdam, if he can stay within contact or within eyesight of the leaders. Performance 2:06:17.
Well, this is fascinating.
Be able to repeat that here this year.
Richard mentioned that pain expression. There is how he's performing against
if he can stay within contact or within eyesight of the leaders.
Set here 12 months ago.
Well, that is fascinating, isn't it, Chris, to see how they came back on schedule just 7 seconds down on Chirono's course schedule at 30 kilometres, having been
course record of Lawrence
50 seconds down at the halfway point. So that 10 kilometres, isn't it, between to see 20 how and 30 kilometres back on schedule, just 7 seconds down on Chirono's took charge of the schedule at 30 kilometres, having been really picked up the pace and given them a chance halfway point. So that getting back 10 kilometres, getting close to Chirono's course record 20 and 30 kilometres here last year. 2:04, the pacemaker really.
That, I think, Richard, that injection of pace to put them back onto course record is probably the main reason why Abdi finds himself so far back. He simply couldn't live with that injection of pace set by Edwin Kiptoo, who was taking his pacemaking duties very seriously. That, I think, Richard, that injection of pace today, he's earned every penny, because that is probably the main reason why Abdi finds himself so far back. He simply couldn't live with that injection of pace set by our winner today, Kiptoo, who was taking his pacemaking duties will come from very seriously. We've got a group of 9, fee he's been paid today. He's earned every penny, because that is all battling it out here, pacemaking in the last 10 kilometres or so. It's fairly safe to say, I think, that our winner today
just over 10
of this
kilometres
Amsterdam Marathon in the men's race will come from one of this group here. We've got a group of 9,
soon
5
this
Kenyans
is the
and
part
4
of
Ethiopians,
the
all
course
battling
where
it
they
out
come
here
back
in the
last
city centre, 10 kilometres or so of this race.
They're going to get just over 10 kilometres to go, the spectators, and as we'll soon see, this is the part of the course where they come back River into the city centre, the famous site, the Carré Theatre. They're going to get a lot more support from the spectators in the sites, but it does mean that that's where they'll get a lot more support from the spectators. They're in the middle of that group towards the Amstel River and the famous sites. Actually, some of the lesser-known athletes and the Rijksmuseum, they won't be interested in the sites, but it does mean that that's where they'll get a lot more support from the spectators. They're in the middle of that group. Tadou Abata, 21 years of age, has run 11 some of the lesser-known athletes, but today is his debut at the marathon. But it's the more experienced Kenyan athletes. Number 5, Elijah, 21 years of age, has run 11 marathons already, and he's the one who's striking out at the front of this group at the marathon.
Well, you can get a real sense of just the speed now.
The
racing has started, there's no doubt about it. So we're looking for signs, we're looking for the vulnerabilities, if you like. Who is going to be the next to find this pace too punishing? As they work their way past 32 kilometres, and once they hit 35, they are very much the racing home straight, there's no doubt about it. So we're looking for the race, for signs, we're looking for the vulnerabilities, if you like. Who is going to be the next to find this pace too punishing? That final straight. They work their way past 32 kilometres, and once they hit 35, they are very much on the home straight, if you like, the final 7 kilometres of the race. And if the gloves aren't off by then, they certainly will be.
Experience of winning races. There's one of the Kenyans who's been with the leaders, but is now starting to struggle a little bit. Bernard Koech. Well, it looks to me his last race of any kind was really string them out. So he's been mentioned about, in some ways, his experience with the leaders, winning races. There's one of the Kenyans who's been with the leaders, but is now starting to struggle a little bit.
Really winding it up. You can see the crowd and the noise and the atmosphere on the course increasing with every kilometre as they approach the centre of Amsterdam. Of course, that also plays a part. You saw it in Vienna last weekend. Elliot Kipchoge said the spectators and the really winding it up course was see the crowd and the noise and the atmosphere on the course increasing with every kilometre there as they approach the centre of Amsterdam. And of course, that also plays a part. You saw it in Vienna last weekend. Elliot Kipchoge said the spectators, but that's just his way. Atmosphere on the course was particularly uncomfortable. He's got achieving what he achieved there. Very wide, lots of communication there. Number 3, we're talking about Rotic there.
Yeah, he's a very determined runner, but in some ways
slightly uncomfortable, doesn't he?
A little bit ungainly,
Richard, but that's just his way. I don't think he is particularly uncomfortable, but he's got this slightly
he's got a big heart,
very wide arm carriage.
Very, very
Number 3 we're talking about left of the picture.
Yeah, he's a very determined runner. We can see from those shots that he has lost a little bit of eye contact with that sort of wide arm carriage. So looks to me as though he's got a big heart. Maybe 300 metres, 400 metres back from the leaders. Still looking smooth. We can see, but he's got a very tough. He has lost last quarter of the race. Lost eye contact, running very much on his own route. I suppose you can only hope to me as though these leaders. We saw Bernard maybe 300 metres, 400 metres back. If Courage can drop back, still looking smooth, or be dropped, but he's got a very tough last quarter of the race and running very much on his own, gain back some distance. I suppose you can only hope that some of those leaders.
So here's the leading group.
We saw
through 33 kilometres under the railway line here.
If Courage can drop back
into the main station,
or be dropped
in
such a way
less than 2 kilometres to essentially what is the last major turn left.
Gain back some distance
along. So here's the leading group through 33 kilometres under the railway line here. 35 kilometres. They will be very much into the home straight. Got what? Less than 2 kilometres to essentially what is the last major turn left.
Taken over at the front of the race. Got a PB of 2:07.54. So he's
they hit 35 kilometres. They will be very much into the home straight.
They're operating at about 2:04.205 pace. Who's taken over at the front of the race. Kemboy, who's been with that leading group from the start. 2:07.54. He's taken over, operating at a pace faster than he's ever run before. They're operating at about 2:04.205.
So we'll see if they're still comfortably inside.
Daniel Kemboy has been with that leading group from the start. He's taken over,
looking for
in second place
a time of around 1:41.06. They are comfortably inside that. 1:39. Women approaching 30 kilometres, so we'll see. So they are if they're still comfortably inside. Really impressing here. Course record number 8. Workanesh Alimu, who's maybe starting to feel the pace here. This is punishing. 1:41.06. They are comfortably inside that. 1:39.
So back with the men.
1:39.40.
There's Solomon Dixisa. He's been in this position.
Really impressing here.
Last year
is number 8.
When he stayed right at the front of the race
starting to feel the pace here. This is punishing.
So Dixisa, one of the race favourites, still with that group. So back with the men. There's Solomon Dixisa. He's been in this position last year in that group of 8 when he stayed, including right at the front of the race, just running the last couple of miles. On the heels of number Dixisa, 8, one of the race favourites, still with that group. I think there were 3 other Ethiopian athletes in that group of 8.
There is just centre of picture looking very, very comfortable, and just running. You can tell actually that the coach there, who we thought was being dropped, is still he's still working hard, isn't he? He's still just on the coattails of this group. He looks the most vulnerable of the 9 to be dropped, but he's working really hard, and he hasn't been dropped yet.
That is interesting, isn't it? I think possibly when Daniel Kemboy went to the front, the pace might have slowed a little bit.
He's still working hard, isn't he? He's still